All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about simple selectors. Okay, there's many different types of selectors, but we're going to stick to just simple ones to start off with, and that'll get us going. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. And I have the project open where we left off in the last video. And what I want to show you is, let's look at the CSS. This part of the syntax right here is the selector. It's what CSS that's what the browser uses to target or select your elements on the screen. So in this case, your selector is an H1. So that's a pretty simple selector. That's the most basic type of selector, is selecting by an element. You can select by an H1, you can select by a UL, you can select by an LI. Those are all very simple selectors that you can use. And we've seen a lot of examples of that, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. Instead, I want to show you a few more ways that we can select elements on the screen that may be a little more useful. Because, for example, what we may want to do is we very well may want our H1s to be green, but we might decide that there's a few other things on our site that we'd like to be green as well. And so one way that we could handle that is we could actually do a class selector. And let me show you what a class is real quick. I'm not sure we've gone over that yet. So in HTML, we can add a class as an attribute to our HTML tag. So in this case, I could say something like text green. Okay, text dash green, and I could call this whatever I want. And you can actually give many classes to these by adding a space. So this could have a class of text green and a class of text bold if you want. Okay, I'm just showing you, but you'd want to probably name it something that made sense. So in this case, if I give this a class of text green, without looking at my CSS, I can kind of look and see that this is probably going to be green. Now, let's say I also wanted these links here to be green. Well, I could add a class here of text green, and I could do the same thing on the about me. Okay, so if I save that and refresh it, what we'll see is nothing will happen here. One second, let me save this. And if we refresh, this is still green because we still have the selector here is green. But let's go ahead now and change this and show you how you can use a selector for a class, how you can target classes. So to target a class, you use a period and then the name of the class. So no spaces or anything. It's just period text dash green, and I'll save that. And now when I refresh, you can see that my H1 is green still, and my links here are green, and that is because we gave all of those the class of text green. If I take away the class of text green, say on just one of these links, and refresh, then only the first link is green here. And so this becomes very, very handy and useful when you want to reuse styles on many different elements. That way I don't have to do anything like where I'm starting to copy this in a lot of places in my CSS file. I could just create a class called text green and add that class anywhere I need it. And then inside my HTML, and then just those elements will be green, or whatever styles you give it. So that right there is probably the most useful selector, or the most common selector that you're going to come across. Well, I don't want to say that, but it's a very, very common pattern to give your elements a class and then put the target or select the class here in your CSS, and then give it whatever properties and values you want. Okay, let me show you another one. Another one that you can do is, we had talked before about ID. So these elements can have an ID, and remember the ID has to be unique on the page, but I could call this email title or something like that, right? And so now this is a unique ID, and I can actually target this ID with my CSS as well. So it can find this element by the ID, okay, and then affect the styles of that. So let me show you how to do that really quick. Instead of a period, what we'll do here is we're going to use the uh, number sign, or young kids would call that the hashtag, but you're going to use the, I'm going to call that a number sign, hashtag, whatever. It's above your 3 key, so you hit Shift 3, and that will be there, and then you type in the name of it. So in this case, it was email title, and then let me go and double check that. Email title, yep. And so now I can give that a color of, let's say red. We'll make this thing look all Christmassy. All right, so now we have green and red. And so this right here, so if we go and look and inspect in our inspector, it is has an ID of email title. And if I click on that, it actually shows where it's getting styled from over here in the inspector, which is really, really handy because you can see that it's getting selected here by that ID. And I can turn that on and off here in the inspector as well and see what happens. So this right here, start getting used to looking at this, because when you're debugging, let me just move my face here just to make sure we can see everything. But when you select these different elements, it will show you where it's getting its styles from. So in this case, it's getting its styles from styles.css, and it has a class of text green, and so it's targeting that and giving it a green value. If I turn that on and off, you can see in the browser that all of them turn on, all off and on there. Same thing with this. Here's the ID. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, we have the simple selectors of just selecting an element. We can select a class, and we can select an ID. Another thing we could do is we can do multiple, and I think, we've seen an example of this, but I just want to show you. Let's go and find something in here to mess with. So let's go, let's look at, okay, I want my paragraph and my list items, I want all of those to be purple. I don't know why, but I'm just trying to show things that stand out a lot, okay? So what I could do here is I could say, hey, I want all my paragraph tags to have a color of purple. And if I save that and refresh, then my paragraph is purple here. Okay, so I also want all of my list items to be purple. And I could go down here and do another one and say li color purple. And that will work. The problem with this approach is that if I decide to change these, then I have to change this color in 2 places. We don't really want to do that if we can avoid that, and if it makes sense in our code. So what we're going to do here is we'll just get rid of this, and we can actually use a comma and do li here. And this is the exact same thing. This is saying, hey, all my paragraph tags and my li tags, make those purple. So if I refresh that, now it's the same thing. Now you can also, you don't have to just do these elements here. You can do a combination of classes here. So you can do text purple if you wanted, which we don't have that set up in our HTML, so that won't do anything, but you could do that. We could also do email title, and we'll save that. And let's refresh and see what happens. Okay, so let's look at what's going on here, because this is going to bring up another interesting point about CSS. We put the email title in with this selector here, so we have a comma selector here, and we set it that it should be purple. But up here, right above that, we said it should be red. And in fact, if we look and we click on that in the inspector here, we can see that it is purple, and if you look down, the other one's there, but it's crossed through. So if I turn this one off, you'll see that it'll turn red again. It falls back to that one. And that is the cascading nature of CSS. So in this case, these two things have what's known as the same exact specificity. We're going to talk a lot more about specificity later, but just imagine that these have the same weight, except for this is further down in the document. So it cascades downward, which is where the word cascading comes from. So if you have something up top and something below it would override it, then it takes the furthest one down in the file. So it reads the file from top to bottom. So the stuff on the bottom takes more, has more weight or more power or more, you know, what can I say, more authority than what's above it. Okay, so this has a higher, this is higher than this, even though it's lower on the screen. This gets read in last, so it's like, hey, what am I supposed to do? I made the email title red, and now you're telling me to make it purple. Well, it's going to make it purple because it cascades down, okay? Cascading style sheet. It cascades down. That's one way to think of it. Now, we could do other things to where this would have a higher specificity. Let me just try that real quick. If I do H3 before that, and I don't know for sure that that'll work. Yeah. So that gave it a higher specificity, and we're going to talk more about that. So don't let that confuse you. But right here, this right here is just saying, hey, anything with an ID of email title, make it purple. This is saying, hey, any element of an H3 exactly that has an ID of email title, make that one red. So this has a higher level of specificity than this because it has, basically because it has more things to select it by, okay? This is very specific. This is more specific than this. And there's a formula that we can look at to try to figure out how it would do. There's a value system placed on it. But again, if this is the same specificity, so if I add the H3 right here, you're going to see that this is also going to be turn it back to purple because now this is the same specificity as this. And so it goes with the lower one down in the sheet, the cascade. So now it will be purple. So I don't need either one of these. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of this here. I just wanted to show you that you could have multiple selectors in here, and it can be a blend of email and class and elements or whatever, and they can all be the color purple. So refresh the page here, and we'll go back to red. Okay, and don't be too concerned if you're a little bit confused about, when we're talking about specificity and things like that. We're going to go over that a little bit later, but I just wanted to start kind of introducing that concept of if you have styles that start kind of interacting with one another or overriding one another, well, how's it going to choose which one to do? Because it can't do the text that's both red and green. It has to choose, hey, this text should be either red or green or black, and so the way that it chooses that is based upon specificity, okay? And I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that word right, so don't be too harsh on me, but that's the best that I can say that word. It's hard to say, but basically it's the root word of that is specific, and so specificity, there's levels of specificity, and we'll start to see that as we make more and more complex selectors later on. But for now, I just wanted to go over simple selectors and just start introducing the concept of specificity. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoy this. Go ahead and play around. Don't feel like you're going to break this page or anything. Just mess around with it. Change the colors up, add some different classes, and go ahead and practice selecting those classes and IDs and elements and play around here and see what happens. While we're here too, I'm going to show you a couple resources, and I usually do this at the end of the chapter, and I will again. But if you're just curious and you want to read more, if you go to w3schools.com here and go to tutorials and learn CSS, there's a pretty good CSS here, quick tutorials that you can go through and learn more. about these. So if you want to play around more with CSS and you don't want to wait another day for me to give you some more instruction, go ahead and look through that if you want. Or maybe it might help clear some stuff up if I've left you confused about something. But I wouldn't be too worried if you are confused. Now, I think the better documentation, though, to get used to looking at, and this is a little more, this is a little harder to read, but it's a lot better. Let me just find it here. It's developer.mozilla.org. And you can go to Mozilla here, and Mozilla has the great documentation on CSS. And I mean, you could see everything that you could ever imagine here on CSS. And so if I wanted to look up border, then they have great documentation with some examples, and it goes on. So this is a better documentation. So if you go to developer.mozilla.org, you can look through their CSS documentation and just get an awesome experience. This is really good. W3 Schools is a good tutorial site for learning for beginners. So I do like to show that because they really simplify things. But for more thorough and complete explanation on different properties and selectors and things like that, you'll want to check out developer.mozilla. And you guys need to, reading documentation is a skill in and of itself. So you need to get used to reading documentation because you're going to be referencing documentation a lot in your career as a developer. So start early. That's why I'm showing you these. Start reading stuff. Get ahead of me. You know, like I said, the people who are going to make it are going to be the people who are good problem solvers, and B are going to be the people who fall in love with the technology and just have a desire to learn more. One of the things that I love the most about this job is that every other job I've had, I've learned it pretty quick, and at some point you get to a place, even I had a job that was kind of complex. I used to work for a dental lab, and I made crowns and bridges and even some dentures and things like that. And that was a neat technology. But after about 10 years of doing it, I felt like I plateaued off of what I was going to learn. Now, I could have kept getting better, but kind of just got bored. With development, however, man, with the way that technology changes and there's just so much out there, I will never know everything there is to know. And so my desire to keep learning and to keep growing is fulfilled with coding, with this industry, because it never stops, and I love that about it. I love that I love that every day I realize how much I don't know, and I have to learn more and more and more. And that's awesome. And if you fit into that mold, if that's kind of the type of personality you have, you're going to be a great developer and you'll last in the industry for a long time. All right, guys. Well, I will see you in the next video.